A 2-year-long odyssey. The 4th chapter in a now beloved internet series. The most ambitious project I have ever attempted and completed. A series of 13 videos that truly put my skills, my passion, and my patience to the test.
Hello, my name is Gibson, otherwise known as BionicleSaurus here on the internet, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how I made Dinosaur Island Season 4. The first early planning stages of Season 4 began just after I posted the finale for Season 3. It has been a very long process. For anyone who has forgotten over the years, which I don't blame you for, the last episode of Season 3 was posted in August of 2015. So yes, this has been a truly mammoth project. Now, the earliest things that I had to come up with were concepts. These are not stories yet. These are just basic concepts for where I wanted to take the characters next, in the next stage of their journeys. I think possibly the first idea I really had was for Red Sail's story in Season 4. I knew that the basic concept was essentially that Anubis was all he had left. That is the most basic concept, and everything else sort of bloomed from that. The next concept I had, and I kind of knew I had to do this. I knew it was the proper time, and I knew that as much as it was going to upset people, it would shift the story in the direction I wanted to shift things, and that was Bloodtooth's death. That was another very early planning stage. And certain things started out as much more basic concepts. There were a lot of figures that I simply wanted to have in there, like, say, the Collectatorvosaurus, otherwise known as Darkclaw. That originally came into the script just as an idea to put a Torvosaurus in as a character, and I had no idea the type of character and the type of plot that would end up surrounding that. The T-Rex story actually started more with the idea of simply bringing in the Collecta-feathered T-Rex, Owen as a character, and then the juvenile version, Jane, of course. And later, the Bloodtooth death idea sort of came into play, and then I ended up having the idea to kill off both of the adults, leaving Jane an orphan, and the whole story just sprouted from there. That was what I try to do at the beginning of a season. I don't try to mark things out point by point from the start. What I try to do is come up with these concepts where I can just brainstorm them. Jane is an orphan. Red Sail just has one family member left. Darkclaw's taking over the south side. There are tensions in the Utah Raptor pack. That last one is really vague, and you can take that in all sorts of interesting directions. The other big thing that I had to come up with very early in the pre-production stages of Season 4 was the characters, the cast. A lot of the characters were influenced by figures that I wanted to have in the show. I do not think this is necessarily a bad thing, because you can make just about any type of dinosaur any type of character. You can have villainous herbivores, sympathetic carnivores, you can have a large character that is actually rather weak and has unfortunate things happen to them, or a seemingly weak small character that ends up being stronger than you would expect. You could do all sorts of things with all sorts of different genre of prehistoric non-avian dinosaurs. And so simply picking things off of what figures I thought looked nice and what figures I wanted to use artistically is not necessarily a bad thing. Is it the best way to do things? Probably not, but I think it worked out in some instances, not so much in others, and I'll get to that in a second. So Season 4 is of course dominated by a lot of figures from 2015 and 16. A few 2017 releases got in there, but that was mostly too late. I was mostly done with filming, but I did get just a few figures in there, like I believe the Parasaurolophus, along with a couple of others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head now. The Safari Limited Parasaurolophus, that is, I should of course specify. So it could have been a little more unique, it could have had more odd, obscure animals, but overall it's a very epic, big cast for sure, with a lot of large creatures. Now, speaking of its size, I think it's worth mentioning one of the first major flaws I'd like to talk about in Season 4. One of those things that I want to reflect on because it's something I'm not 100% happy with. When I was first developing the characters, like I said, a lot of it was influenced by figures I wanted to use on camera, figures I knew were going to look good. And that resulted in a lot of characters, and a decent amount of them ended up being really underused. Red Sail, one of the first characters whose story and plot I first started developing, ended up being overshadowed for the most part, and there were certain characters like Michael the BionicleSaurus and William the Bichon Long specifically that did not need to be characters. They did not need to be there. Hardly anything happened on their end of the story. Now, there are some minor characters. Minor characters are not bad things. Orangeback the Shunnosaurus, minor character, but he has an important role to play. He shows the first pushback against Darkclaw's takeover of the South, and he also shows the first tragedy that Darkclaw really causes. It's not the first life that Darkclaw takes, but it's the first life of a character we know that he takes. So overall, are there too many characters? Yeah. But overall, I think the cast was a good one for the most part. Could have been better, could have been more unique and diverse, but I am still fairly satisfied with it, and I think the amount of really cool new figures that I was able to fit into the season is just one of the funnest parts about making it. It ended up being so much fun to show all these awesome new, colorful, exciting looking models on camera for the first time. And so we move on to the next stage in creating a season of Dinosaur Island, and that is the script, actually writing out a script. Now, Season 4 was not thoroughly scripted out, it was fairly loosely scripted out. Very few scenes were actually written out like moment by moment, let alone shot by shot specifically. Although the narration was scripted, overall it was done in a fairly loose format, and a lot of things were added and changed fairly late into production. Now, the first process you basically have to go through when scripting is to essentially transcribe concepts into plots and stories and arcs. Concepts really are A points and B points. Jane is an orphan, Jane gets revenge. Red Sail only has Anubis left, Red Sail gives everything he has to save Anubis. It's these basic things, fleshing them out, figuring out how you get from one point to another is the next part of the process, really. And essentially what that entails is writing scenes. When it comes to constructing scenes, you basically have to make sure that every scene serves some sort of purpose and moves the plot forward. You want as little filler as possible. Now, I feel like some people watching my videos occasionally would call episodes like, say, episode 5 and 6, especially, filler. I believe episode 5, to an extent, could be considered filler, specifically the scene with Michael and the Carnotaurus hunting a pair of stegosaurs. That scene does not need to be there, and I regret putting it in there and not putting in something more important and valuable. Episode 6, on the other hand, while some people said it was fairly filler, I think is simply slow. Not boring, but a slower paced episode. You can have scenes where almost no action happens, but if you're watching characters develop and you're watching stories go in some sort of perceivable direction, then they do have a purpose. The scene with Shredder and Switchblade infighting might seem like it's not really much, and the action scene itself is really short and small scale, not overly exciting to watch, but it's important because it begins the long trials of the Utahraptor pack and their various infighting and tensions and conflicts throughout this season. So when it comes to Season 4, there is some filler. I am not perfect at writing by any means. I wouldn't even consider that I was all that good at it when I did Season 4. I think I am fairly good at it now because I've had time to reflect, and I am putting way more time and effort into the Season 5 script, and even the Season 6 script, which I have indeed started work on. So when it comes to Season 4, there are a lot of flaws. Like I said, because of the amount of characters, certain characters don't need to be there, certain ones don't get focused on enough, and a lot of little subplots and minor stories end up feeling slightly disjointed, I think simply because I gave myself too much to handle. Now, certain stories overall are fairly good, with very few flaws. Certain ones flow together fairly cohesively. But overall, transferring concepts, especially when you have a lot of them and you're really excited to do all of them, into stories is very difficult, and I'm excited to try and do it more effectively in the future. Now, when it came to writing this script, I had a very tricky balancing act to successfully achieve, and that is the balance between pleasing the fans and doing what the story needs me to do. Normally, this is already a tricky balance. You don't want to just turn people off of your show completely, but you also, on the other hand, don't want to make it so pleasing that it becomes boring. You want to put conflict in there, and you occasionally want to anger the people watching it or sadden the people watching it. You have to create various emotional responses. However, I believe this balance was of way more importance than usual with Season 4, because Season 4 was my Jurassic World. It was my Force Awakens. It was the big, way higher quality sequel after a really long break from the last seasons that people really liked. You have these 3 seasons that, now are probably not as good as Season 4, but people really, really like them. There's a fan base there. I take a really long break. Everyone thinks it's dead and over, and then, no, it's coming back. It's this big hype train. There was a lot of excitement around promoting it, and that was one of the most amazing parts of this experience. And so I needed to make sure that while the plot was being served, that the fans would like it as well. So there are some fan servicey moments. The moment when Bloodtooth first returns is really epic. The moment when Silas comes back, the fact that he comes back at all. Having Red Sail there, having a lot of characters there that people really like. Originally, things were going to be darker. I have a version of the script where Red Sail dies. And so I had a lot of really risky ideas. At the end of the day, I think the most risky ones that got worked in were the fact that both Bloodtooth and Nigel die. They are not the only old characters to die in this season, but I think they are the most saddening ones. And so I had to take some risk. And I also had to bring the story into a new age. I had to make Jane the protagonist rather than simply continuing to use Bloodtooth after so many years of already having her be the center. So I had to shift things. But at the same time, Season 4 has this really somewhat fan-servicey, very epic cinematic feel, especially the first maybe 2 or 3 episodes, and the last episode as well, being a very epic, large-scale battle that is, again, I hope rather cathartic for people to watch it. It was for me after slowly developing this story. It was very nice to finally see its end. And so hopefully I achieved this balance well. Again, I felt a lot of pressure on me with this one. I wanted to take it in directions that I wanted to take it, but I also wanted to make sure that this is what my viewers wanted and something that they would like. And it's amazing that I have to even take that into consideration, that I have enough people watching that that's important. It's incredible, really. And I'm so glad that overall the reception on Season 4 has been quite positive. But we'll get to that more later. I brought a lot of new elements into the filming of Season 4. A lot of new techniques. Specifically, one of the big ones was trying to create an illusion of size. For the first time, I was really concentrating on making these dinosaurs feel big. feel real. And the way I primarily did that was to try to stay under them at all times. I think this may sound a little bit odd, but essentially what I mean is that I would have the camera on the ground looking up at the figures. The camera, when I could, was at all times at least on the figures' level, if not below them, looking up. You combine that with trees and hills and fields in the distant background, and you have yourself a pretty good size illusion. Now I'm taking a bit of a different turn for the upcoming season, Season 5, and I'll talk about that in a different video. But for Season 4 specifically, I definitely had a very distinct style going. It looks quite good. It's not always great, but overall, it looks a heck of a lot better than any of the previous seasons. And the amount of work I put into actually framing things and getting the size illusion there, getting the background and the figure itself to look really good, I think in the end paid off. This is certainly the best looking season of Dinosaur Island so far. But why is that? Is it simply because of the new techniques? Is it because I'm using a slightly better camera than I did before? Well, it's those things, and it's also the fact that I'm no longer shooting in my backyard. Well, at least partially. Some of the scenes in Season 4 were still filmed on my very small property in my garden, but most of them were filmed in two primary locations. The first one is Swan Creek. These are both locations, by the way, in Washington State, USA, where I live. They are fantastic little public parks. Swan Creek is the south side. It's where Dark Claw, Orangeback, the Utah Raptors, Silas, and Redsail are. There's beautiful streams and creeks and waterways, and also some wonderful grasslands and areas of woods as well. Beautiful. It's a perfect little representation of the semi-tropical southern environment on Dinosaur Island. And the second environment that I had to get the perfect location for was the cooler and more coniferous north. And for that, I used China Lake. It has a big lake, which I can easily say is Stegosaurus Lake, which is the original lake from the first season of Dinosaur Island, of course. It's also the perfect environment for the northern forest. There's very few broadleaf trees. It's all fir trees, needle trees, evergreens, and it just looks perfect. These were not the only locations I used, however. There were two more. Franklin Park is one of them, which represented the northern prairie, or plains, or grasslands. It's the area where we see the brachiosaurs and other sauropods, along with some stegosaurus, in the very first scene of the season. That was a bit of a hard place to film at, because if I panned just the wrong way, you'd see massive buildings in the background, but it was still fun. And the final place I went to was Juniper Ridge. It's a ridgeline out in the middle of the Cascade Mountains. You can see Mount Rainier, you can see Mount Adams, you can see Mount St. Helens. It's an amazing spot, and it of course represents Mount Evolution. And it is the location we see in only the final 2 episodes of Season 4. It was very difficult filming up there. In general, the filming process was a little more stressful and a little more intensive than usual this season. Filming on that ridge was such a crazy experience. The sun was going down a little quicker, a little further, every other minute it felt like. We didn't have headlamps, we had a set time frame to get this done, and we had a lot of footage to shoot. I ended up having to reuse some footage in the final fight, and I also ended up having to speed some of it up to make it look a little more exciting because my puppeting got really bad by the end of that shoot. In fact, it wasn't that stellar the whole time because I think I was rather stressed out and I just wasn't thinking about what I was doing. Thankfully, the beautiful location almost completely masked the flaws in that final episode, of which there are many to be pointed out. Editing ended up being my favorite part of making Season 4. Seeing everything finally come together after years of planning, writing, scripting, and filming, which of course got very exhausting after a while. It was so amazing to finally see stuff coming together on my screen. Every little bit of footage that I synced up with audio and put some narration on and cleaned up and trimmed up and got just perfect and exported was incredible. It didn't matter if it was a random quick scene or one of the most important scenes for the plot of that season. It was just amazing to see it all unfold. There wasn't a single episode that I wasn't thrilled to be watching when it was finally done, because seeing that type of project finally come into being is It's an indescribable feeling. It really is. So the process of editing is a fairly simple one for me personally. I don't put a whole bunch of time into it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't put in a lot of time still nonetheless. The first step is essentially just going through the footage, cutting out stuff I don't want to use. If there's shots that are obviously bad, shots where you can see my hand coming in a lot or something like that, those immediately get tossed out. The next step is to bring in the clips and align them in the correct order along the sequence in my editing program, and then I will trim off the beginnings and ends of them. Generally in the beginning, the camera shakes as I turn it on, and then there's some fumbling as I pick up the figure and frame it, and then there's puppeting, and then I put the figure away and there's shaking as the camera gets turned off. You want to trim that. You just want the middle. And in some shots, I would do it over and over again, and there'd be little bits of my hand that I could edit out. Other times there was too much and I had to discard the clip. Basically, this stage is just what I'd call cleanup. You're just cleaning up the clips and getting them in the correct order. The second stage, and this is by far the funnest, is sound design. I never designed sound with the old ones. I made the sound effects myself, all on the spot, and you could hear cars and people talking and all sorts of other urban city environment noises. And now we have something completely different in my series. We have actual layered sound effects that are added in post, and it's not always perfect. I definitely got better as the season went on. But by the end of that season, I am so happy with how the audio editing and the sound design of the season turned out. There are a few layers going in most scenes, all scenes really. You always have an ambient layer, whether that's environment, ambience, or music is dependent on the scene and the moment in the scene sometimes, and sometimes it's both. For instance, in the scene in the Southern Rivers in episode 12, where we see Red Sail and Anubis for the last time in the season, there are 3 background layers of audio. There's stream and creek noises. I believe there's some bird calls and other environment sounds, perhaps some wind I can't quite remember. I know there's another layer. And then there is music, of course. And it all comes together, hopefully blended well and not just being a cacophony to the ears. And then you add on to that, of course, the dinosaur sounds and the narration, and when it's all put together, it's so fun to see. And the final stage is to put all the scenes together, because I did edit scene by scene, and then would put a group of scenes together to make an episode, and slowly cut that in the proper way, and divide it out in the proper way for each episode. And then there'd be some final polishing, adding credits, and when it all came together, it was just, as I said, always such a fantastic experience to finally see the finished episode on screen. And then it was as simple as uploading it. And y'all know how that works. You press a few buttons on your computer on YouTube and there you go. You just wait, and then you hit publish, and it's all good. I don't need to tell you how to upload videos. But what I do think is worth talking about is the reflection that I have formulated here. I have a few things I'd really like to say about this season and about the response to it. First of all, some of the most amazing memories I have regarding Dinosaur Island Season 4 happened before it came out. The hype train, if you will, that occurred for the first few months, maybe 5 months, longer than that, I don't remember, but for a group of months before the first episode actually dropped, as teasers and trailers were coming out, it was so much fun. It's when I first started doing live streams on my channel, and there would be so many just hyped up discussion, Season 4 discussion streams where I would just talk with fans and occasionally have people on, and it was so much fun. There was just this indescribable, magical just energy between us all. And I don't mean that in like a literal, like magical energy way. I just mean that the emotion was there and the excitement was there. And when we were all together talking about it, there was just this communal just happiness that stemmed from it. And knowing that this final big project that I was so excited about and that everyone else was so hyped for was coming up sooner and sooner every day, it was just an incredible little period of time. And then the actual response to the season itself came in as I uploaded episodes. Now granted, I didn't always have time to reflect on that because a lot of times I was going straight into editing or even filming last minute for the next episode. Yes, there was some last minute filming, a lot in fact for this season, and I hope to avoid that for Season 5. I hope I have thoroughly planned out all the scenes I will need and don't have to add anything in just a few days before the episode is supposed to be released. But every episode that came out, people were so positive about it. And when they weren't, they were so constructive with their criticisms. People posted like 20-minute, half-hour even reviews of episodes of this season. That is more than I ever could have hoped for. That is way better than more views or more likes or even more support overall. Having people critique things that in depth with that much care for what they're talking about is absolutely the most incredible response, the greatest type of response I got to episodes of Dinosaur Island Season 4. Anytime I saw a new review of the whole season or of a specific episode uploaded, I would go and watch it immediately. I love hearing what people have to say, and knowing that you all care about this so much that you would make these types of videos is incredible. Not to mention, they are super helpful. I know now exactly how I would rewrite Season 4 and refilm it if I could. I'm not going to, but I can take the mistakes and learn from them for Season 5 and 6 and whatever comes after that. And so for the future, I have all this valuable information about what worked and what didn't. I've described Season 4 in the past as Season 1, 2. Doesn't make much sense when I say it like that, but what I mean is that it is almost the first season of a new series. It's not. It's not even a soft reboot. It is a direct continuation. It is the same canon universe as the first 3 seasons, but at the end of the day, we're introducing a new protagonist, being Jane. We're killing off the old one almost immediately. It's kind of a fresh start sort of a thing. And in a lot of ways, Season 4 was sort of me just putting my feet in the water. It originally started as a big finale, because I didn't think I would do any more, but then I realized it's not a finale. It is a new beginning. Thank you for watching, and BionicleSaurus, signing out.